Good evening, and welcome to Armageddon Live, Series 2, Episode 17, The Fifth Trumpet, Part 1, on this 25th of April, 2020. I'm your host, Daniel Decrypted. I have to say sorry for being a little late, but I wasn't quite as prepared as I thought I was. But anyway, let's quickly jump into our study. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if I'm completely prepared for it. Yes, we don't want to go there yet. Ew, I'm not even... Alright. So, the fifth trumpet, one of the first things we can ask when we come to the fifth trumpet is, who is the locust, or what are the locusts? So it says in Revelation 9:4, talking of the locust, they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree. Revelation 9:4. Now when you want to find out what a particular thing is in a symbol is in Revelation, what you need to do is see what information they give you and find out where in the Bible similar imagery is being used. So in this case, we're told that the grasshoppers are not to hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree. And it turns out, of course, that this has a similar parallel in the plague of locusts. Here, though, we're told they are to eat every tree, Exodus 10:5, eat every herb of the land, Exodus 10:12, and that they did eat every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees. There remained not any green thing on the trees or in the herbs of the field, Exodus 10:15. So you see that they're repeating the same sort of phrases. Instead of grass of the field, we have herb of the land. They're talking about trees, and they're also mentioning the green things. Now, maybe this doesn't... Well, actually, it turns out if you look for locusts in the Old Testament, this plague of locusts is the very first mention of locusts. But in case you're not convinced that this is really, that the fifth trumpet is really talking about the plague of locusts, or it's using that as to decipher it, if we go and we look at the plagues on Egypt, we'll notice that the 6th through 9th plague are actually paralleled in the 7 trumpets and in the 7 bowls. So the 7 trumpets, of course, are in chapters 8, 9, and then the last one is given in chapter 11. And the plagues are all given in chapter 16. But you'll notice that the 7th and the 8th plague are similar to the first and 5th trumpets, and the 6th and 9th plague, the 6th and 9th plague are similar to the 1st and 5th bowl. Or here we can rearrange our trumpets and bowls so they parallel, and then maybe you can see the structure, the pattern a little easier. So as you can see, the 1st and 5th bowls, they're like the 6th and 9th plague, And then the trumpets are in the center of this, which is a sort of strange structure, and it's strange that the bowls and trumpets pattern like this, but there it is. I mean, it is a pattern, so you can't ignore it. And when you look at the bowls and the trumpets, there's not much else in them that actually pattern or that parallel the plagues, except for the blood, the bloody water, which you find, it's the second trumpet has the sea turned into blood, and then the second bowl and the third bowl have the sea turn into blood, and then the streams and fountains of water turn into blood. But other than that, there's not a lot of parallels between the trumpets and bowls and the plagues on Egypt. So these really stick out then. So it's not by accident. It's clearly, it was meant for us to notice this, and then we could tie the 8th plague to the 5th trumpet. Alright, so now if you look at, there's 4 animals that are listed in the 5th, under the 5th trumpet. First you have the locusts, then you have the scorpions, then you have horses, and then you have lions. If you look at least the first 3 of these, the locust, the scorpion, and the horse, they're all sort of tied to deserts. Here we have the desert locust. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Latin scientific name. But you can see from the little map on the side that the desert locust covers basically the area of where Palestine, where the Israelites lived. And, well, it covers a lot of the Middle East. So it's definitely in the desert areas. And of course, scorpions. We read in the Bible, the very first occurrence of scorpion in the Bible is in Deuteronomy 8:15, and it says, "The great and terrible wilderness, wherein were scorpions." This, of course, is talking about the Israelites when they are going through the wilderness on their way to Canaan. So it associates scorpions definitely with deserts. And then, of course, with the horse, well, we have the Arabian horse, which came out of Arabia, desert area. Alright, so it's interesting that these animals are all connected with deserts. Of course, you could have the horse connected with something else, but we'll see that there's a good reason to connect it. Our locusts will actually show you from the Bible. Next, I'll show you from the Bible that it actually is connected to the desert too. Because you can ask, well, let's flip back a ways. Well, when it comes to the locust, the, what was it? 7th plague on Egypt. Where did these locusts come from? Because, I mean, it's nice that there's a parallel between the trumpets and the plagues, but what do the plagues actually tell us about these locusts? Does it give us a clue of who they are? Actually, it does. It tells us, in the plagues, it tells us their source. It says they were brought into Egypt by an east wind. An east wind would have taken them from Arabia then. Okay, it's interesting. We sort of suppose that the horse was an Arabian horse. But there's even some more interesting things. If you look through the occurrences of locusts, grasshoppers, related things, actually grasshoppers is the same Hebrew word as what's being translated as locust. So I guess you could say it's a inconsistency in the translation of the King James Version, that they translate the same Hebrew word differently in two places. One says locusts and one says grasshoppers. So we're actually talking about the same thing here. This is the Midianites in the story of Gideon in the book of Judges. So the Midianites are actually named grasshoppers, called grasshoppers. So it says, they destroyed the increase of the earth. They came as grasshoppers for multitude, and they entered into the land to destroy it. Judges 6, 4, and 5. And there's a second occurrence. It says, they lay along in the valley like grasshoppers for multitude. Verse 7:12. That's chapter 7, verse 12. Alright, so we see that the Midians are compared to grasshoppers, right? Now, if that were the only comparison or point of similarity between the plague of grasshoppers, it would probably be pointless to list this, but there's another connection. It says that the Midianites are not only the Midianites. The Midianites came up, and the Amalekites, and the children of the east. Now that's interesting. So that's Judges 6:3. That's interesting. So the plague of locusts came from the east. Now we have the Midianites being called grasshoppers, and they're mixed with the children of the east. 2 points of commonality between our plague of locusts, which is being used because of the similarity of imagery to decode Revelation's 5th trumpet. But now we've found out that there's some connection to the Midianites too. And of course the parallel verses or other verses that list the same sort of thing is the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east. That's verse 6:33. The Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east. Verse 7:12. And finally, all that were left of all the host of the children of the east. Verse 8:10. Alright, so going on, since there seems to be this connection, what else does the story of Gideon tell us about these Midianites, Amalekites, children of the east? Well, it says something else. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. Judges 8:24. Ishmaelites. If you know anything about the Arabs, Muslims, Islam, they actually trace their origins to Ishmael. They have this connection with Ishmael. So this is odd. We seem to be getting from the Bible confirmation that what we're dealing with here is the locusts are actually symbolizing someone who's coming from Arabia, someone who's Ishmaelites, and this very much ties into the Muslims, because the Muslims are indeed from Arabia and they are indeed Ishmaelites. So just I hope you can see how the Bible is therefore decoding itself. It's using the imagery of the locusts and the fact that the Bible is, it's rather limited in the usage of the term locust and imagery of locusts. So by looking in the Bible for other uses or other occurrences of locusts, the first thing we stumble upon is the plague of locusts. And Revelation we've seen is has structured things. Like if we go back here. Revelation has been structured in such a way as to pick up on this tie-in of the fifth trumpet to the eighth plague. And then when we follow that down, we find a source or a characteristic of these locusts, and that's that they're actually coming from the east, and that automatically puts them in Arabia. But then when we follow the story of Gideon and the Midianites, we find that this story actually ties in with having the same sort of characteristics that the plague of locusts has. I.e., of course, the Midianites are being called grasshoppers. In fact, it's the exact same Hebrew word, so it's not just grasshoppers, they're being called locusts. And they're mixed up with the children of the east, so they're also coming from the east. And then when we press our search even further, we find out that they're Ishmaelites, which once again ties in well with the description of the Muslims of Islam, the followers of Islam. So anyway, that's all we have for well, of course, too, if we go back, it makes sense that that these locusts would be tied in with horses too, because under the fifth trumpet we're not just talking about one beast that's made out of locusts and scorpion and horse, but we're talking about many beasts. This is a cavalry, right? It's a bunch of horses with riders. And this, of course, fits in with the Muslims too, because that was their choice of their battle strategy. Unlike most other armies that had foot soldiers, the armies of the Muslims were all horseback riders. This, of course, being an example here. You see an Arab here on his Arabian steed, and he's got his gun, and that's basically how the Arabs fought. Alright, so that's all we have for tonight. But tomorrow we're gonna look at some more of the characteristics that are given to these locusts, and we'll show that indeed the Muslims do fit rather nicely with the pictures that are given. I hope you've seen too that this is not just me taking history and trying to tie things in, that it's from the locust plague that things actually start to open up, that this truly is the Muslims. It's not some imaginary thing. It's not something from my own imagination, right? It's the initial deciphering of the imagery is coming from the Bible itself, from the seventh plague on Egypt, and then from the story of Gideon and the Midianites. But tomorrow night we'll start to look at more of the imagery and see if the imagery fits the historical description of the Arabs. Now, of course, well, anyway, I bid you good night. I hope this was a blessing to you, and I hope it's piqued your interest and that you'll come back again. So, bye-bye for now.